All right, the scripture I wanted to talk about today is John 10:27. It says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." That's Jesus speaking, and he's talking about us as his followers being likened to his sheep, and he is the shepherd. He often refers to himself as the good shepherd in the word. So what does that mean? We hear his voice. A lot of people think, oh, that means like an audible sound, but for the most part, I'd say over 90% of the case, it's not a actual physical sound that you hear God's voice, but it's a feeling, right? At least in my case, it's most been a feeling in my life. It's called a still small voice. A good example of this, a scripture that I really like, is in the Old Testament in 1 Kings 19. This is Elijah. He was a famous prophet of the Lord. You know, he hears God's voice all the time, right? But in this passage, it says that God was not in the wind. God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the fire, right? He wasn't in all these big things, but he was in the still small voice. And that's how Elijah heard God's voice in that instance. Here are a couple ways to become more in tune with God, to be able to hear that still small voice better. One way is obviously reading the word. A second way would be prayer, obviously, just quieting the noise around you, removing distractions. I would say try to limit your time in TV, media, social media, all these things, and get more time in prayer and silence. And I'll just end this video with a testimony of one of the times that I've heard and listened to God's still small voice. This was at a music festival this past summer, and I remember I was praying because I wanted to bless someone. I wanted to pray for someone. I felt like somebody needed to hear a witness and he needed to hear encouragement. And so I prayed, God, bring me the right person. And I felt like in my inward man, I felt like, just wait by this fire. And so I was by this fire and I just waited there, and I was by myself, and I waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, nothing. Finally, this guy comes up to the fire and he starts asking me questions, and he asked me questions. I got to pray for him. I got to bless him. I got to encourage him. He was that lonely one that was hurting. He told me a story about his heartbreak, and I got to pray for him, got to bless him. And that's all because I listened to God's voice. So I encourage you, listen to God's voice today and stay in the word, and I'll see you on the next video.